Okay, in this video I just want to take a minute and show us how to graph this using a Texas Instruments graphing utility. I find that to be very important that we are fluent with our technology. I never want the technology to replace the knowledge of how to do it without the technology. I never want us to have to forget it because it's paramount that we know how to do it without the technology. But the technology is a great way to solidify and give us some peace that knowing that we have gotten the correct answer. So in the last video, I'm just gonna use the same examples I gave last time. One thing I forgot to do in the last video is that I didn't actually label these critical points, and I guess I should have done that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, just to make sure that you are familiar with these points. So we took our last example, and we graphed this by hand. And now we want to use the calculator to make sure that we're correct. I just want to make sure that we recognize that these critical points are going to be pi, comma 3. This one's going to be 2 pi, comma 5. This will be 3 pi, comma 3. And this will be 4 pi, comma 1. And over here we're going to see the same thing, but on the negative side. So we're going to have negative pi, comma 3. Here we're going to have negative 2 pi, comma, this will be comma 5. And this will be negative 3 pi's, and this is going to be comma 3. And this will be negative 4 pi's, and this will be comma positive 1. And these are all negatives here as well. So let's go ahead and use our graphing calculator to graph this, and then we can solidify that we have a correct graph of our trig function. So you can graph either one of these. I'm probably going to graph this one on the right. That way I don't have to use as many parentheses and make an opportunity and create an extra opportunity of errors. So I have my graphing utility here. So I have my graphing calculator here. It's an emulator. So hopefully you can follow along with yours. Mine is the TI-84 plus C. Plus C just means that it has the color, I believe. Otherwise, it should be pretty much the same. So when I'm graphing, the first thing that I like to recognize is that notice here that we have a pi, so we have to make sure that we are graphing in radians. So if you go to mode on your calculator, you'll have all these different options, but more specifically on this fourth, if you go 4 options down, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down, it lets you choose between radians and degree. Make sure that you're in radians, especially because you're using values of pi. If not, you're going to get something completely incorrect. So we want to make sure that we're in function, we're not parametric or polar, and you can go through and work through these separately and do some more examples. But for right now, we're going to go ahead and safely assume that we're in radians. So I'm going to quit out of this. So I'm going to hit second mode. I'm going to hit second mode. And I'm going to quit out of that specific screen. I'm not going to quit on you or quit on anyone else. So now I'm going to go to y equals. So I'm going to click this y equals button, and notice on mine it has a couple different colors. If you don't have the plus C edition, that's okay. You will have just the one color. So I'm going to use my first y equals. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to type in 2, and you don't have to hit the times key, but I like to do it just to make sure, I don't know, just it's a process flow for me. So I hit 2 times cosine. I hit 2 times cosine, so I'm going to hit the cost button here, and it opens it up. So I'm going to type x divided by 2. I'm going to type x divided by 2, and then I'm going to subtract off pi, but I have to type in pi, and notice here it's second to my asterisk, so I'm going to hit second up arrow asterisk. And notice that gives me the pi value, and then I'm going to enclose my argument with my second parentheses, and then I'm going to add a value of 3. So now I've input this as such. And again, if you graph the first form or the second form, you're going to get the exact same graph. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to hit graph, which is going to be up here in the top right. And notice I see a very long curve, so I'm thinking that's going to be correct because I remember for this example, my period was a value of 4 pi. So every 4 pi, we expect to see the graph repeat itself. So this is definitely a very long period. It's definitely not shortened or a period of 2 pi. I can clearly see that. So I'm going to go ahead. Oh, it doesn't even expand. So I'm just going to have to keep it like such. So I'm going to just try to identify some critical points. My first one that's easier for me to identify should be the value at 0, when x is equal to 0. So I'm going to hit trace. And notice when I hit 0, I hope you can see that value here, but it says a value of 1. I know at pi I should have a value of 3, so I'm going to hit second up arrow, and notice, oops, so second up arrow, and notice that puts the value of pi in, and I expect a value of 3, so when I hit enter, we have a value of 3. So I feel very content that we did this correctly. I'm going to try a couple more values out to make sure. So let's go ahead and try tracing a value of 2 pi. So I'm going to hit 2 times second up arrow. And this gives me a value of 5, and that's exactly what I expected. And we should be very happy with this. So you can go to your table option, and when you go to your table option, you're going to see them. You're going to see the increments in value of 1, 2, 3. I'm going to go and hit the positive button, and I'm going to change my table increment to a value of pi. So now when I hit enter, it now notes that every value, every critical value, we see here we went from pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi, and so forth, is going to be increasing at that same value. So notice I'm getting all these nice integer values, and that's what I'm suspecting. So you can use your plus key in the table to determine rapidly whether or not you have correct values. So notice here between all of my critical points was a value of pi. If this were, for example, to be a value of every, I don't know, pi over 4. So this is pi over 4 plus pi over 4 is 2 pi over 4, or pi over 2. I would then change my critical value. My incremental value, my delta table value, to a value of pi over 4. That would help me easily rapidly identify all my critical points. So definitely become fluent with the calculator option. Definitely practice it a couple times. However, don't rely specifically on your calculator, because sometimes the brain is, actually, every time the brain is a much stronger tool than the calculator, and we often have some calculator input error, so we never ever want to substitute the knowledge for the calculator.